But I was talking about how, you know, maybe like the seducers, like Don Juan, or what's it? I can't think of the other one, but some of the famous seducers for.
I don't know. You know, though, but
yeah. But how kind of their approach with women is almost like they're looking at a woman, like the woman that they're with at the time, their obsession, and maybe they're womanizers and they're moving from woman to woman, but at the time, they're obsessed with the one woman, and they make her feel like she's the only woman in the world. And maybe she knows that this guy is just a seducer or whatever, but she appreciates his focused attention because he's treating her like she's a work of art, like a masterpiece that he must study and know every detail of and explore. And that, like, having that kind of mind, see, that's such a different mindset than it's being a connoisseur, right? If I go to a restaurant, if I go to Golden Corral, okay, and I go to the buffet, and I'm like, oh, get some mashed potatoes, have some meatloaf. It's like, you know what I mean? I'm just shoveling food in my mouth, okay? I don't know what any of that stuff tastes like. I mean, maybe the mashed potatoes are pretty good. Okay, fine, whatever. But I haven't really enjoyed or savored the food, right?
Yes, you're having so many and not focusing on it.
It just filled a hole in my stomach. That's all it did. And I think a lot of men can treat women in relationships that way. I mean, I'm sure women can too, but I can speak from a male perspective in the sense that that's why there's no romance, for one, but also that's why they're not happy and satisfied, is because if you're just treating the woman you're with like a buffet at the Golden Corral, then you're like, oh, well, maybe this buffet is better, or like this food is, you're just sampling all these different dishes. Whereas if you're more like a connoisseur, like, having a fine wine, or you sit down at a nice 5-course dinner and you cleanse your palate
one at a time. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And enjoy the experience and the texture, and you notice the quality of the food and the aroma and all those things, right? Again, that idea is a romantic idea. So that's a hint for, how the romantic, but then how much more pleasant, how much more of that food do you enjoy? It could even be similar food.
Right.
But because you have savored the experience, because you have looked at it from those eyes, from the eyes of the connoisseur as a master. And so when a man looks at a woman as if she's a masterpiece, a work of art that he must explore and know every curve of her body, it's a different, he's going to reach a different level of satisfaction than he would treating her like a buffet.
Right.
And so that's a large part of it too, is it is psychological that as a man, not only that, but her response from that guy is going to be so much more because, I mean, you tell me, do women appreciate that?
I mean, look, I think so, without going into a totally another topic, because we've hit so many, like, even in the like sexual sense, I've never understood women who want to be like beat up and demeaned, because I'm like, I want a man to treat me like a goddess,
right.
Like it, in that scenario, like I want to be appreciated. I don't want to be like torn down especially in such an intimate act.
Right.
So it makes sense to me, but I don't know the thought process fully of women who, and maybe it is more of like a validation seeking thing,
Yeah.
And that is usually a woman has some other things she probably needs to work on to feel good about herself so that she doesn't need to seek validation in that way and tolerate those sort of things. But it makes sense to me. You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, or whatever the saying is, but it makes sense that that's and it's more sustainable, because what if you actually like one of those women? Now you're already like kind of going down the right path, right? Because you already romanced her. She's already like has positive feelings about you. Rather, if you meet a woman and you're like, you're not that hot anyway, and she's like, oh, well, I have to prove to this guy that I'm hot, and then you end up taking her home because you manipulated her in that way. she's always going to think back to how you like told her she wasn't that hot and
Right.
like said all these other kind of like almost negative things to get what you wanted from her. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you start off on the right foot, you're already going in the right direction if you decide to pursue something with that woman.
Right. Exactly.
But I think something for us to discuss in this episode too that goes with people not being satisfied is the access that they have to people with online dating and Instagram, social media, all of that, because that does also make people not appreciate what they have, because they can be like, oh, you know, well, whatever, I'm going to go get on this dating app and I'll have like however many matches by the end of the day. So it's not that big of a deal. Like I can just go on there and I can find someone else. And back before that, it was harder to meet people and it took more effort. And so people probably appreciated more of what they had because it wasn't as easy to get into another relationship. And like, yeah, dating apps are a good thing. I mean, we met on a dating app, so I'm not saying that they're horrible, but in the sense of some people not feeling satisfied with what they have, it just makes things worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because that's exactly what I was going to talk about next. Is
well, we're so connected that I can just read your mind.
The disposable culture that we live in, where people are disposable, right? So much of society is like that today, where it's like, oh, even, you know, the friendships that we have and we're Facebook friends we have, you know, it's like they're not really have any depth to them. And so you can just toss people out. I mean, we talked about in the last episode about the oneness, or I think it was the last episode, and how, I mean, that is the same idea. It's like when you're becoming one, you're not treating a person as a disposable. It's like, well, if you don't suit my needs anymore.
Like chopping off half of you. You know, if you become one, it's like, if you're going to dispose of that person, you have to cut yourself in half.
Right. And I think the thing about it too is it's like the reason why so many people are in shallow relationships is because if you treat people as disposable, you're never going to get to the depth.
You can't get deep enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it takes work to work through the issues in love with respect to get down to the core.
And it's easier to dispose of people if you're not fully in, if you're 1 foot in the door, 1 foot.